When a money supply is based on real economics and real fundamentals, then it doesn't depend on faith in order to be viable. So if you have a currency that's backed by gold, for example, you don't have to have people believe in that currency. It doesn't matter if they believe in it or not, because there's gold underneath it all, and you don't have to believe in gold for gold to have inherent value. It has value by itself automatically. Whether or not you have faith in gold is irrelevant. But when a money supply gets away from a gold standard and it becomes a fiat currency, it really becomes a faith-based currency. And this is what we have in most societies today, including the United States. The currency and the economy, especially the stock market, is based entirely on faith. If you hand a dollar bill to someone, you're handing them essentially a piece of paper with some ink and special markings on it. There's nothing really inherently valuable about that piece of paper. It's only what it represents that is accepted as value by the other person. For example, if I give you a piece of money that has the number 1 on it, then you assume it's worth $1. If I add 2 zeros to it and hand you a piece of paper that says $100 on it, then suddenly in your mind it's worth 100 times more, even though the value of the paper is exactly the same and the value of the ink is exactly the same. You accept it as being worth $100 because you believe in the money system. You have faith in the system. Well, what governments and central banks of the world have reluctantly come to fear is the truth that faith can be shattered in an instant. Because faith is not based on fundamentals. It only takes one act or one catastrophe or one exposed betrayal, if you will, to shatter faith instantly. And that shattered faith can ripple throughout the system, and it can cause entire systems of fiat currency to come crashing down. And if you look at the state of our world economy today and the debt pyramid upon which it is based, you have faith-based systems in the stock market, in bonds, in government debt, in derivatives, in banks and banking systems, in FDIC insurance. You have artificial faith in pension programs and the faith that they will someday pay you back after you retire. You have faith in Social Security. You have faith in the idea that government will one day be able to pay you back for some of the taxes that they have been confiscating from you all the years that you've been working and paying taxes. These are all illusory. None of these faiths are based in fundamental reality. And in fact, history has shown us that these ideas, these beliefs, are shattered with great regularity. Throughout human history and the rise and fall of human civilizations, we've seen again and again examples where this faith was misplaced, where fiat currency systems collapsed, where governments collapsed, where massive bankruptcies shattered entire nations, where debt systems experienced cascading collapses and destroyed what people thought was wealth, but was actually faith in a numerical system, in essence, faith in an equation that unraveled and reversed itself and in effect destroyed the illusion of wealth that had existed in the minds of those participating in that illusion. And this is exactly why government today, especially Obama, the White House, the Federal Reserve, the banks, and the complicit media that is really state-run media, they spend so much time creating more illusions that the economy is great, that unemployment is low, that the stock market's going to keep going up forever, that the housing market is strong, that people have optimism. It is all pushed aggressively because it is the only thing preventing the system from a cascading collapse. Remember, it is a faith-based system now, so you have to keep the faith to keep the system going. And in order to keep the faith, you have to turn the government and the media into essentially monetary preachers who are preaching on their economic Bibles, if you will, which is a religion of ideas that have nothing to do with the real world. All of these ideas that they're pushing violate mathematical reality, violate economics, violate history. But as long as they can keep enough people suckered into the system, if they can keep the faith alive, if they can keep the hope and change whirring around in your head, then they can prevent the realization that this is all fiction from crashing the system. And they can actually keep it alive for a lot longer than you might expect. But eventually, every faith-based system that diverges from reality ends up collapsing. You can, if you're a government or if you're a central bank, you can run the system on faith fumes, if you will, for quite a long time, many, many years, perhaps a few decades. But eventually, the divergence from economic reality becomes so exacerbated and so obvious and so abhorrent to rational thinking that the faith is shattered. And what's fascinating about this is that the more divergent your system is from actual reality, the more rapid the cascading collapse kicks in once it is initiated. So, in other words, the more any monetary system is based on pure faith rather than fundamentals, the more rapid the fire burns through it and wipes it out once the faith is shattered. It's like having a forest that's full of dead trees that haven't yet burned, and there's fuel all over the ground, and there hasn't been a forest fire there for 100 years, and it's a pine forest full of pine cones and pine needles and trees ready to burn, and it's a dry, hot summer. All it takes is a spark. And because there's so much fuel there for the fire, then that fire spreads rapidly throughout that forest and burns it to the point of destruction, killing everything that lived there. Instead of just burning out the dead wood, it destroys the entire ecosystem. And that's what we're looking at now economically with the debt collapse on a global scale. They've created so much fuel for a massive fire that it's going to not just burn out the dead wood or prune off, let's say, some bad economic decisions or some bad companies that don't have a profit model. It's going to actually destroy the global economic ecosystem. They've allowed it to become so bad and so rich with the fuel of false faith, if you will. There's so much invested in the falsehoods of the illusory economics and the promises of returns on derivatives, gambles, and so on, that when this collapse is triggered, it's going to burn like a raging, deadly fire through the whole system. It's going to take out every tree, every living system, every squirrel, every deer, every blade of grass. It's going to destroy every seed. And it's going to leave nothing but dead ash and disaster in its place. And that is the economy that we're going to see in the aftermath of the economic collapse that's coming. So what is your defense against the system? Well, it's actually simpler than you might suspect. If you have savings in a savings account, if you have money in a checking account, if you have a debt instrument that you think you own, you are in effect invested in the faith side of the global debt system. And those numbers in that computer at that bank can vanish, they can disappear, leaving you with nothing because you don't have anything that's real. So the solution is to convert your fictional numbers of your savings account or your retirement account or your checking account into things that are physically real, things that you can touch, things that you own, things that you have possession of, things like actual gold, for example, or silver, precious metals. Land is fantastic because that land, if you own it free and clear and you have title to it, land is not going to disappear. No one can just come and take it from you. It's not going to vanish overnight. Real estate is real, even though sometimes the value can be fictional based on faith. At least the hard assets, a historical building, a warehouse, a functional home, a piece of land that can produce food in a functional farm operation, a piece of land that has water on it, that has a running stream, for example, or a well of some kind. These are real assets. These things are real. You can touch them. You can possess them. You can own them. You can protect them. You can defend them. You can, in many cases, you can carry them with you. Gold is portable, for example. So you need to start thinking in terms of what's real versus what is fictional or delusional. The entire dollar-based money system is delusional. It's a fictional fabrication. It is a faith-based system, and the faith will one day shatter, and it will collapse like a raging fire. And you'll be left with nothing. Investments in mutual funds are fictional. They're not real. They don't really exist. Government bonds, treasury bills, government debt is fake. It's fabricated. Even municipal bonds are fake. They don't exist. Derivatives don't exist. They are a mathematical formula based on a promise to repay, which is based on the faith of the ability of the loser of that side of the derivatives equation to compensate the winner. Well, it's all fiction. In an orderly society where things have not gone really bad yet, then yeah, maybe that system continues to work, and there are two sides of derivatives equations who can exchange risk and exchange money and make that system work. You know, you can buy puts or calls and trade options, or you can trade futures, and right now it works because the market is orderly. When it really hits the fan and that begins to break down, then the other half of that trade, that party doesn't exist anymore, or they have lost their ability to make good on their promises. Suddenly the faith is shattered, and once it is, it ripples through the system extremely rapidly. And it rips apart every derivatives market, and every futures market, and every options market, and every currency exchange market. They are all obliterated, almost like someone dropped an atomic bomb on the whole system. It can go down literally overnight, globally, because it's based on nothing that's real. So it's very important in your mind to start segmenting what is physically real versus those things that are artificial constructs. And if you look at most of what you're encouraged to buy or invest in or support, they're all fictional constructs. The last thing the system wants is for people to own real things. They don't want you to stockpile, gold or ammunition, or even land for that matter. They don't want you to own any means of self-reliance or self-sufficiency. They want you to be entirely dependent on the system. And they want you to believe their fairy tales, their magical thinking that says ridiculously that all economies will continue to expand forever, and that all stock markets will always go up forever. These are mathematical falsehoods, and yet that they are the assumptions upon which the entire system of debt is currently based. In reality, you can't expand an economy forever because resources are finite, not infinite. You can't keep growing your way out of debt forever and use that as a justification to keep piling on more debt. The math stops working after a period of time. And in this global economy, we are now rapidly approaching that time, that day of reckoning, when all of the falsehoods that our societies have promoted over the years are going to collapse. And when they do, those who are invested in the faith side of the economic fictions will be wiped out. But those who have diversified into real things, physical things that they can own and control and possess, will be not just the survivors, but the actual owners of real wealth for the future society. Most people will find themselves living in poverty. In the next decade, we're going to see a massive increase in global poverty, the collapse of debt instruments, the collapse of economic faith, the collapse of the government globalist narratives. And we're going to see that the preppers were right, the survivalists were right, Gerald Celente was right, Peter Schiff was right. Everybody who warned about the coming collapse of the global debt system was spot on. And in fact, they were the only people who were right when everybody else in the mainstream media and the government was feeding you lies and propaganda and distortions on purpose so that you wouldn't lose faith in their fairy tales.